Information. This episode is kind of all over the place. Overdue Doctor Who review time, and before we can get to the glory of Donna in Series 4, we do first have to get that wonderful bridging narrative between Series 3 and Series 4. No, not Time Crash, I already did that one. This one being the Christmas special, Voyage of the Damned. Before I start talking about it though, just a quick note, this video is sponsored by the podcast Radio vs. the Martians. Mike Gillis and Casey Doran host a variety of topics and guests, all of them geeky, all of them very interesting, and often very funny as well. Check them out at radioversusthemartians.com or wherever you get your podcasts. So, Voyage of the Damned. This one, I did not know what I was going to think. I haven't watched this one in ages. I'm actually not sure that I've watched it front to back since the first time I saw it. I've seen bits and pieces of it again since then. I'm not sure I've actually done it end to end for years now. And I think in some ways I got a new appreciation for it on some levels. There's definitely things at play here that I did not pick up on before, partly because I couldn't. There's a specific element in terms of foreshadowing some of the stuff that's going to come later for the Doctor specifically that I think you don't really appreciate until you go back and see it with hindsight and knowing what's coming down the line. So, what I mean in terms of that, and yeah, they're just going to be spoilers all over this thing. That's how these particular reviews tend to work. So, the whole thing that happens towards the end with the Doctor talking with Mr. Copper. Well, first of all, Mr. Copper is such a fantastic character, and also played by a Doctor Who veteran. He played such a dick back in Revelation of the Daleks, but he's so sweet here. Some of the humor in terms of, like, the Earth facts that he gets wrong, like, I don't always laugh at those, and I think there's more of those than there need to be, but he is so sweet and endearing as a character that I'm prepared to overlook that. But when the scumbag, the shareholder guy, the stock trader, he thanks the Doctor, and the reason he thanks is because of some stock deals that he did that this whole chain of events is going to make him rich. And Mr. Copper says, and the thing is, I'm saying Copper, it might actually be Coppa. Like, I should have looked it up, but like, I'm always pronouncing these things how I think they are, and then getting 5 million corrections in the comments. Anyways, moving on. I'm going to call him Mr. Copper. So he says to the Doctor, if you could choose who was going to live, he's not the one you would have picked. But if you could decide who lives or dies, that would make you a monster. And you wouldn't know this watching it for the first time when it aired, but that is a pretty heavy bit of foreshadowing for what's going to end up happening towards the end of Tennant's run. I mean, most specifically with Waters of Mars and where that goes. And you can see kind of his frustration, that's going to plant the degrees that he goes to later on. He has this little mini tantrum when he realizes that he kind of saved Astrid Peth. I think I said it right this time. But he couldn't save her fully, and he kind of has this little hissy fit, saying, I can do anything! And that is not dissimilar to the little fit he throws at the end of Time Part 2. There's this episode, I think, if you haven't revisited it in a while, in terms of the Doctor specifically as a character, in terms of his, where things go with him later on, there's a lot of what whether it was done deliberately at the time or Russell T Davies just looked back and went, ooh, I could do something with that when he got to later on. It feels very deliberate and it feels very planned. I would say more so than pretty much anything done with the Doctor as a character up until this point. That's not to say that the Doctor's never had a purpose or anything like that, but I don't feel like there have been emotional character journey threads planted. There have been narrative threads planted for later payoff. Not this kind of character arc, though. And I really feel the need to recognize that on this episode. There's some other stuff that's quite good. Astrid is a fun character. She's very endearing. She has terrific chemistry with the Doctor, so she works well. Midshipman Frame, Alonzo. Alonzo. I don't know what that accent was. What the hell are you doing, man? So, he again, very endearing. And there's even some nice moments with characters like the Captain and this sort of pain he sees, when he sees Alonzo. And he's like, they promised me it would be old men on this ship, that he's going to be sentencing this young man to death, and that is causing him some pain. The death of the character, the whole thing, I mean, the ship's called the Titanic, but narratively it's taking a lot more cues from the Poseidon Adventure, or I don't know if the remake had happened by then. But in any case, and the sort of nature of the deaths is interesting as well, because some of them are incredibly unfair and like so almost arbitrary. And that can feel gratuitous sometimes, like, why did you do that? There was no reason to. Here, it does feel like it feeds into the Doctor's frustration with everything going on. The fact that things are going along this unfairly. You've got Banacavalata, who is, again, a very sweet, endearing character. And I do kind of love that he insists on being called by the full name because, I don't like people shortening my name. I introduce myself, hi, my name's Nathaniel, and people say, hey, can I call you Nate? I'm like, no, my name's Nathaniel. So I'm right there with him with that whole, no, Banacavalata. So, I get a little bit cheesy, but I think that kind of worked. There's other cheesy elements that don't work so much. So the big one is Max Capricorn. I don't think he works on multiple levels. The first is that this story, like a number of Doctor Who stories that I have some degree of frustration with, I don't think actually actively benefits from a villain. I mean, just the fact that you wouldn't know that there's a villain until he just shows up. The situation is dire enough. You could be told, like, this was an insurance scam, or, whatever. Or, you could have the captain being like the captain on the Titanic and assuming nothing was going wrong, and then they still find themselves in this situation. So I don't like the things that are good about it, and the characters and Tennant's frustration with everything. None of this requires a villain, and the villain that they have is so cartoonish, like right down to the ding, glint on the tooth, which feels like straight out of a Saturday morning cartoon. And also, Max Capricorn is really, really stupid. Because here's the thing. All right, so his whole plan. His company has tanked already. He has squirreled away funds. So there's no insurance scam going on here. This is all purely revenge on his part because he's been ousted from the company. So what he's going to do is he is arranging for this to happen. It is going to not only cause the board of directors to basically lose everything, it's also going to end up sending them to jail because it's his plan that this thing crashes on Earth and basically wipes out all the life there. And he lives in his little crash-proof box or whatever. But why is he even on that ship? Because no part of his plan that he mentions involves people thinking he's dead. Like zero. There's no portion of his plan that references people need to think I'm dead. And even if that was what he wanted to happen, nobody knew he was on the ship. So no one would have any reason to believe that he died in the crash, even if that was what he wanted. So why is he there? What reason would he have to physically be on a ship that is designed to crash onto a planet? I don't care that he's got a box that he can survive in. Why is he even there? It's really dumb. And there's other like weird things that I try not to get too nitpicky. Like that, I think, is more than a nitpick. That's really stupid. But in addition to that, one of the things that bothers me about this is this, to me, feels like the first time that the Doctor is really starting to bank on his own reputation. And he has that whole, I'm the Doctor. I'm a Time Lord. I'm 905 years old. I'm from the planet Gallifrey and the constellation Castorberus. This whole, take charge speech. Now, the Doctor can take charge. The Doctor has taken charge well before this. But, like, between that speech and the whole thing that happens after Max dies, and the hosts just default to the Doctor as the next highest authority figure, which I get. Sorry, but like 5 minutes prior to this, the entire reason he was able to get to meet Max in the first place was because the host didn't even recognize him as literally anything because he wasn't a registered passenger. So how does he go from being literally nobody, like such a nobody that they had to take him to the person in charge to even figure out what he was, and now suddenly he's the next highest authority? Why? Because he's the Doctor, which, is this whole messianic thing, which I just don't care for. And, we got a little bit of that with the resolution on Last of the Time Lords as well. And this here, like, feels like it's hammering that even more, though. And that's not an element that I like in general when it comes to modern era Doctor Who. And I do say modern era because the whole Messianic Doctor that's a recent thing. Classic Who never really did that. And it's one of the things that I tend to not like about modern Who when it goes in for that too much. And this really feels like sort of the solidifying of that as something that's going to be a thing. So yeah, that bugs me a little bit. I know a lot of people complain about the hosts. They're cheesy, but I don't think they're that much cheesier than other cheesy stuff that I'm okay with. So I'm not really going to hold much against the hosts, as in terms of, their look and their function and all of that. But again, even though I've spent the latter half of this review complaining pretty harshly because, the things that I don't like about this, I think are quite bad. But like I said, this is actually better than I remember it, better than I've previously given it credit for. And I'm glad I rewatched it because I do think that if you haven't checked this one out in a long time, it is worth revisiting because, especially with the knowledge of what happens later on, there's layers you may have missed before. So, Voyage of the Damned. You seen it? What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Stuff to do, Patreon. It's a big one. There's other links down. There's my P.O. box. There's merch. Check it out. Click on the buttons. They take you places, or don't. Because at the end of the day, folks, you're the council. I'm just running the meeting. So until next time, this council is adjourned.